Greetings, peeps of the interwebs. Jake here. It's been a few weeks since the last uploaded here on the channel, mostly just because, I don't know, here lately I've kind of been focusing on, like, some other things, so I haven't really been as, I don't know, I guess motivated to record anything here on the channel, but, I don't know, since a few people have been asking me, like, if I was gonna record, like, you know, top 10 movies of 2017 or anything like that. And initially I was, but then, you know, I kind of kept putting it off, and now it's March. But people are still kind of, you know, asking if I was going to do one, so I was like, you know, what the hell. I'll go ahead and do my top 10 movies of 2017, even though we're, you know, 3 months into 2018 now. But anyways, so here we go with my top 10. It's actually a little difficult to, or at least with some of these, because it's actually a pretty decent year for movies. So, the way I kind of categorize my list is I try to kind of diversify it a little bit with just like movies of different, you know, kind of genres and stuff like that, as with, you know, pretty much any kind of top 10 list or list of any kind. So, that being said, I'll start off with my number 10, which is the Lego Batman movie. Thoroughly enjoyed this movie. I thought it was both a great spoof of Batman and his whole, like, history and mythos, but it was also a love letter to the character and everything about Batman. And I think that's what this movie did so perfectly, is finding that nice balance of kind of heartfelt, like, respect and love and care for the character and his history and all the other characters in Batman's history, you know, like the Robins and, you know, Batgirl, all of his villains, in particular the Joker, but also making it really funny and poking fun of, like, some of the obvious things to make fun of in the Batman mythos. And the main reason why I put it on this list is because even though I enjoyed the hell out of this movie, there are some that I probably liked more or thought were just better movies as a whole. But I also wanted to add, you know, an animated movie onto this list. So that's why Lego Batman is here. Again, fantastic movie. I loved it. But, you know, and even though there were movies that I'll maybe like better, I still wanted to put this on my top 10 list just to kind of, you know, change it up a little bit. So, anyways, moving on to number 9 is Wind River, which this one was a bit of a later entry into my top 10 list. It was a movie that when it came out in theaters, I didn't get around to seeing it. I really only just saw it about a month ago. And fantastic movie. It's maybe not the easiest watch because it is a very, like, heavy, dramatic movie that kind of deals with some difficult subject matter at times. So it's definitely not, you know, probably a movie that, like, most people would, like, kind of eagerly be waiting to see for, like, you know, just kind of like the fun popcorn type of movie. But it's really good, and it's probably one of Jeremy Renner's best performances that I've seen him in. And Elizabeth Olsen is fantastic as well. And I believe it was also Taylor Sheridan's directorial debut. He's also the guy that wrote Hell or High Water and I think Sicario. So he's kind of at this point with just from the little I've seen of him, because Hell or High Water is one of my favorite movies of last year, 2016. And Sicario was really good. So it's kind of one of the things where now anytime he's attached to a movie, whether it be writing, producing, directing, whatever, it's definitely got my attention because, you know, so far the man's had no misses. Everything's been great by him. So Wind River is excellent. If you're more looking for, like, you know, a heavy drama, and you haven't seen Wind River, definitely check it out. It's fantastic. Moving on up is number 8 on my list, which is War for the Planet of the Apes, which, even though this is probably my least favorite of the new Apes trilogy, which all of them are fantastic, and this movie is by no means bad at all. And I know some people kind of complained that it was a little slow, which I can kind of see that, but for me the reason why I like this movie is it is a more intimate and personal story with Caesar. Perhaps even more so than the previous 2 films. And I think maybe one of the mistakes was calling it War for the Planet of the Apes, because even though that is kind of what the movie's about, it's more of the backdrop for the movie. Because it's really more more character driven with Caesar than it is focused on the war aspect. Because it really isn't like a big action set piece until like there's one at the early on in the movie and then one towards the beginning or the ending. So I think maybe even though it's I don't know, like I feel like the title could kind of go like one way it's kind of fitting, but at the same time I think maybe if they had changed it to something else, maybe people would have been a bit more lenient because some people are kind of like, oh, it's called War for the Planet of the Apes, but there's not a whole lot of war, which again is kind of fair, but I don't know. At the same time though, I think it's a really solid kind of conclusion to this this trilogy of the Apes movies, and might be one of my favorite performances from Andy Serkis. I mean, he's pretty much great in everything, but I think, again, since this movie is a bit more intimate and a bit more personal to the character of Caesar, I think he really, really shines in this movie. And again, the special effects are just outstanding. I mean, they've been great in all the previous Apes movies, but it's just getting more and more realistic with the way they portray the apes in these movies to where they look so realistic. And again, that's part of the beauty with these movies is the fact that they're able to, get so much emotion out of CGI characters, basically. So, yeah, I thought it was a really good movie, and I don't want to quite say like it was. I maybe wanted to like it more than what I did. So I think that's why it's a little bit lower on my list, but it's still a fantastic movie, though. Moving on is probably a more underrated movie, Logan Lucky. Like it seemed like the people who saw this movie all really enjoyed it, but for whatever reason it didn't quite get the recognition that I think it deserves. Because it's both just a really, really funny, really clever movie. It's basically like a redneck Ocean's 11. I think that's even a line in the movie, actually, that people compared it to, because it is basically like a heist movie. And the whole cast I thought was fantastic. Aside from, what's her face? Hilary Swank. For whatever reason, was not very good in this movie, which is odd, because she's normally really good in everything else I've seen her in. Although she's not a very big character, so it didn't really take me out of the movie that much. But Channing Tatum just continues to get better and better as the more movies I see him in. And Daniel Craig, I think, was the real standout performance in this movie. Because he pretty much steals every scene that he's in, and I just love the character that he plays. And I'd really like to see him do more roles like this. Don't even necessarily have to be more comedic, but just more, I don't know, just kind of different roles from what he's typically known for that kind of really just showcase his range. Because he's a really good actor, and I like him as Bond, but I just feel like in a lot of movies he just hasn't really been able to showcase his range as much. So yeah, Logan Lucky, if you want a good like kind of comedic heist movie, or just a really good movie in general, definitely check it out, because again, it kind of flew under the radar for most people, and I was thoroughly entertained throughout the entire movie. It was one that I wanted to see, but I didn't really know, I guess, what my expectations would be, like where it would fly kind of on my, I don't know, I guess, scale of appeal. But left the theater and I was just like, wow, this movie's fantastic. More people need to know of this movie and see it. So moving on to my number 6 is Wonder Woman. This movie is excellent, and it really makes me feel good that this movie is like the DC movie that really pretty much universally everyone loved. It did great financially, critics loved it, fans loved it, and I think Patty Jenkins did a fantastic job with really capturing the essence of Wonder Woman. And there are just so many great scenes, not just action scenes, but just really personal scenes with Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman that I really like. Just kind of again, the smaller, more intimate moments, like when she tries ice cream for the first time. I really like those moments. Because it just felt very genuine, and I don't know, I was very skeptical of Gal Gadot in her acting performance, because there wasn't really enough of her in Batman vs. Superman for me to really gauge how good or bad she is as an actress. And most of the DC movies have not really been working for me. Like, I loved Man of Steel, but Batman vs. Superman was disappointing. Suicide Squad was... yeah, it was okay, I guess. Like, I think I'm more like the squad... Like, I like the team, not so much the movie. Justice League is... you know, it is what it is. But Wonder Woman, I just love the fact that, like, this movie turned out so great. Because I was very, very hesitant. I was really worried that this movie would be like another mess, like a lot of the other DC films. So I'm just really glad that that Wonder Woman of all the DC movies like is the one that turned out so well, and really looking forward to like Patty Jenkins coming back for the Wonder Woman sequel. And also it had one of the best like romantic romances between a hero and I guess supporting character than a lot of other superhero movies. Whereas the other, a lot of other superhero movies, like, it's not necessarily bad, but it just, I don't know, like, I just don't really feel the chemistry, or it just kind of feels like they're just acting. Whereas in Wonder Woman, I thought that their chemistry, I thought, was fantastic, and I thought that it just felt really believable that these two characters would fall for each other. So that's definitely another thing that I really liked about this movie, and what I think it did better than other superhero movies prior. So yeah, Wonder Woman, and I wanted to put it in my top 5, but my top 5 honestly is what I had the most trouble with trying to like rank and order them. But I think 6 is still a really good spot for Wonder Woman. But I guess having knocked out or gone through the bottom 10, I'm going to move on into my top 5 of the 10. Because again, this is where I had the most trouble with, because all 5 of these films are just excellent and loved so much, so it's kind of hard to like place them. And I might still look back at this list and like reorganize the order, but as it stands right now, my number 5 is Logan. For the Fox X-Men movies, they've been very hit or miss for me. I've liked about half of them, and then the other half I could kind of just, if they get wiped from the face of existence, I'd be fine with it. But Logan was a great standalone movie, and it was not only just a good comic book movie, it was a great movie that just so happened to have, comic book characters and, comic book themes and elements and stuff like that. But ultimately, it was just a fantastic story about a man dealing with his mortality and the fact that he doesn't have much time left in this world. And also the relationship that he had with Charles Xavier. And it's really a shame that Patrick Stewart didn't get any nominations, or no one would seem to really even put him on the radar of like getting nominated for Best Supporting Actor, because this is the best performance I've seen Patrick Stewart in. And even though everybody knows that Patrick Stewart is a fantastic actor, we've known that for decades, it's still like show this man some love and at least nominate him. Because even if he did get nominated, I doubt he would have won, but it still would have been great to nominate him and just really show the support that he deserves. Because unfortunately, I don't think he's really going to get a whole lot of other roles like this, like he did in Logan, where he can really just just nail every line and just everything about Logan as a whole. The whole kind of pseudo father-son relationship between Xavier and Logan I've always liked throughout the movies, even the not-so-good ones, but again, these two characters, especially when they interact together, have always been solid. In X-23, Daphne Keane I thought was fantastic, considering this is her first movie. And a lot of her acting was more just based on like facial expressions and kind of like grunts and stuff like that. So the fact that she was able to like hold her own against actors like Hugh Jackman and Patrick Stewart says a lot about her. So I think she's going to show up in a lot of other movies later on down the road. And again, also Hugh Jackman. This is one of the best performances I've seen him in. And again, I think he should have at least been nominated. But again, I think it's a lot of the whole Academy still kind of viewing comic book movies and other genre movies is like, nah, those silly movies, they're not prestigious enough. But when you think about it, Logan really has all the qualifications that a lot of Oscar bait or Oscar nominated movies have. I think that's kind of, again, the shame as to why it didn't get nominated. Aside from Best Adapted Screenplay, which I'm glad it's at least getting love for something. at the Academy. So, they're at least making progress. But yeah, Logan is just such a great movie, and I very much relate to Logan because even though I'm only in my mid-20s, I'm a bitter old man at heart, and so I really really connected with the character, and again, it's just a great movie. And I would say definitely one of the best superhero movies ever made, and also one of my personal favorites. And even though it's still, it's only a year old, but I think it's gonna be one of those movies that really stands the test of time. So moving on to number 4 is Blade Runner 2049. So this is a movie that I think a lot of people no one was really not a whole lot of people were really clamoring for a sequel to Blade Runner, because Blade Runner, when it came out in 1982, I think it was 82, flopped. Critics didn't really like it initially, and it took about 30 plus years for it to really find its place in the movie industry, to where people kind of went back, rewatched the movie, and were like, oh my god, this movie's amazing. And also, there's apprehension with a lot of people because it's been 30 years since the original, and here in recent years, there just hasn't been a good track record of movies that are a sequel made 10 or more years later. A lot of them have just not been very good. And even though Denis Villeneuve, who's a brilliant director, and Roger Deakins, the cinematographer, they've been working together on pretty much all their movies, like Arrival, Sicario, all, fantastic, beautiful movies. So, and also, Blade Runner 2049 is really long. It's pretty much 3 hours long. But when I saw that movie in theaters, I did not feel the length at all. When it ended, I was like, oh, it's over. And again, just start from finish, it is incredibly captivating, just visually stunning, absolutely beautiful. And again, the acting is all fantastic from Ryan Gosling, Robin Wright, Harrison Ford, and even Dave Bautista, even though he's barely even in the movie. But I think again, he's another one of those people that's kind of gradually becoming more talented as an actor. And I don't think he should ever necessarily be a lead actor, but I think he's good in supporting roles like he is in Blade Runner, or barely even a supporting actor in Blade Runner. But in Guardians of the Galaxy, I think he's good as a supporting character. Blade Runner 2049, the fact that someone could direct a movie as iconic and as great as the original Blade Runner and somehow 30 years later recapture the essence of that movie so perfectly is impressive. And that's I really like that. I don't know. That's kind of an understatement because this movie is just so amazing. And again, I'm kind of surprised that it doesn't have a whole lot of nominations at the Oscars either, because just again, everything about this movie is spectacular. From again, the visuals, the story, the acting, everything's great. So Blade Runner 2049 is just remarkable, and I would say it's a modern masterpiece, and I might even like it more than the original Blade Runner. I need to rewatch the original just to kind of really compare the two, but if it's not better, they're pretty much on par, which is still incredibly impressive for not just a sequel to a movie, but a sequel that's 30 years later. So if for whatever reason you've been living on a rock your whole life and have not seen the original Blade Runner, definitely watch that. And then after you finish that, watch 2049 and have your mind blown because of how good these movies are. Blade Runner 2049 pretty much had to be on my top 5. And again, this is one I really struggled with because it's just so good. But I think the reason why it's 4 is because the next 3 I enjoyed more. Although I'd say Blade Runner is arguably, or 2049 is arguably maybe the best made movie of my top 10. Again, the weird way that I ranked them, some movies, though technically maybe better made, some of them I just enjoyed more, so that's why some of these movies rank the way they are. So, anyways, moving on to number 3, The Big Sick. This is a movie that kind of took me by surprise, because I'd heard a lot of buzz about the movie, and I really like the cast. I've been a big fan of Kumail Nanjiani and his stand-up for a few years now, and I've liked it when he does pop up, in movies and TV shows, in particular Portlandia. He's like a recurring character that always shows up in Portlandia, and it's great every time he shows up. Really funny guy, and the fact that this movie is pretty much based on the real story of how him and his now wife met, and kind of the struggles that they went through while they were dating. Probably on paper doesn't sound all that appealing. And I think that, like, if this movie had been done, I don't know, maybe like, I think that this movie just was executed perfectly. Because I think if it wasn't, this movie could have fallen flat. But thankfully, the writing, which Kumail and his wife pretty much helped write this movie, which makes sense because they went through it. And so it's got this, what I think is a great blend of, it's definitely more of a dramedy, a lot of dramedy, but also comedy. But I think they fit that nice, perfect blend of for me personally, it was never at one point too dramatic or too funny. There was always that nice, even balance where even though there'd be a dramatic moment, there'd maybe be someone to kind of say something that was funny, but it didn't take away from the drama, or vice versa. Someone would say something funny, but then something more dramatic would happen, and none of the two, overshadowed or undercut each other. It was just this perfect blend all throughout the movie of comedy and drama, and one of the best performances I've seen Ray Romano as well. I knew that, he was, a more versatile actor than most people know him from Everybody Loves Raymond, and some of his other more comedic roles. But I don't know, I think it's nice that finally more comedic actors, even comedic actors who are a little bit older like Ray Romano, are getting these more kind of meatier roles. They aren't just kind of there for a supportive kind of comedic role or something like that. They actually have a little bit more to work with. So and of course, Holly Hunter I thought was fantastic as Emily, Camille's girlfriend in the movie. I thought she was great as her mom. So again, it's another thing where the whole cast, everything was just really, really well done in this movie. And I don't know, and the fact that this is based on a true story, I think that just makes it kind of a bit more inspirational and uplifting. It's just kind of nice to see movies like this every now and then, whether they're based on a true story or not, but just, something that's a bit more uplifting and kind of, just fun and enjoyable. So, moving on to number 2. So my top 2, I think, is where I had the most trouble with ranking them, because they could kind of go either way. But ultimately, I put The Disaster Artist at number 2. So for those of you who don't know, The Disaster Artist is based off the book about Greg Sestero, who was one of the leads in the cult classic The Room, which is regarded as one of the worst movies ever made. And basically, The Disaster Artist is Greg's experience working working on The Room, and his whole relationship with Tommy Wiseau, the director, writer, producer, and star of The Room. And so this movie was, I think, this great blend of really showcasing, one, how weird Tommy Wiseau is. He's a very strange guy. But it never, I don't know, James Franco, I think, did a really good job of embodying Tommy Wiseau, because even though he's a really weird, kind of creepy guy, you're kind of, there's just something endearing about him, and you're kind of like, oh, Tommy Wiseau, that weirdo who thinks he's American. He's clearly not, and he's the weird, very out there guy. But James Franco, and I don't know how he somehow seemed to get in the mind of Tommy Wiseau, but he pulled it off spectacularly. And I imagine that's not an easy role to do. To basically play someone, an enigma figure like Tommy Wiseau. And if you don't know who Tommy Wiseau is, one, watch The Room. It's great. And also just watch interviews with Tommy Wiseau, and it's, I don't know, he's one of those people where I would love to just have a conversation with that guy and pick his brain about things. So, yeah, the disaster artist finds a way to really tell the story of one man's dream, that being Tommy Wiseau, of wanting to be an actor and basically wanting to be in Hollywood. You know, he wanted to act, direct, he wanted to do it all. But every time he went to auditions, you know, he kept getting turned down, or they weren't casting him in the roles that he wanted to be in. He wanted to be a lead actor, but they pretty much were never like, yeah, you're not going to be a lead. You'll probably be like a creepy monster or like Dracula or, you know, vampire or something like that. So basically, it follows one man's dream to basically make it in the industry, and he does, not in the traditional sense, but basically he takes it upon himself to write his own movie and then direct, produce, and star in it. So, like, I don't know, like, it's also kind of uplifting, the fact that, like, I don't know, everyone wants to follow their dream, whatever it may be, and it's always difficult to follow your dreams, and the fact that, like, again, Tommy Wiseau went through all these difficulties and problems during the shooting of the movie and all that stuff. And again, even though he wanted The Room to be like an Oscar-winning, you know, great movie that would go down as a classic, that didn't happen. It was the complete opposite. But he's still, I mean, I don't know, like, it's this weird kind of way where, like, he technically did achieve what he wanted to be. Like, he's famous for, even though making the worst movie ever made, it's still the fact that, like, he is synonymous with, you know, following his own path, making his own movie, doing everything he wanted to do. And I think it's cool that it's kind of come full circle, that with the disaster artist and all the critical acclaim going into the movie, that The Room is now getting more attention, and more people seeing The Room and, you know, falling in love with it, as I did all those years ago. And again, like, it's, like, James Franco, probably the best performance I've seen him in, and there's also a nice post-credit scene with Tommy Wiseau and James Franco, which is great. Like, I would just watch a movie of those two interacting with each other. And I think it does, overall, it follows the book pretty well of, like, telling the story of Greg and Tommy's relationship, how they became friends, and how they set out to make The Room. So, yeah, it's just, like, this really good movie that really shows the heart, because they could have easily been, like, kind of, I don't know, a little, like, insensitive, or like they could have easily handled this movie improperly and kind of been a bit more mean-spirited and made fun of Tommy Wiseau, but instead I think it finds a way to, like, just show him as a human being trying to follow his dreams, and you know, again, a lot of the struggles that went into him making The Room and all that, and it has a lot of heart. But it also has a lot of comedy, has some drama. So it's just one of those movies that has the whole deal. And it was one of my most anticipated movies of the entire year, because I've loved The Room for I don't know, years. It was maybe like 2008 when I first saw it, or 9. I don't know, several years ago. And so the fact that, like, they finally made a movie about the making of that movie is, in of itself, a fascinating story. So definitely check out The Room, check out The Disaster Artist. You will not regret it. So, here's the finale. My number one movie of 2017 is Baby Driver. So, I've been a big fan of Edgar Wright, the director, pretty much since I first saw Shaun of the Dead. And since then, Edgar Wright has not had a miss. All of his movies I've loved. Shaun of the Dead, Hot Fuzz, the Cornetto trilogy, World's End, with Edgar Wright, Simon Pegg, Nick Frost, those three working together is always fantastic. But even a movie like Scott Pilgrim, which should not have worked at all, being turned into a live action movie, especially if you read the comics, you're like, there's no way this could be adapted into live action. But somehow, Edgar Wright finds a way to perfectly nail the movie, like everything about it. Like, the cast was spot on, visuals, just everything about Scott Pilgrim was perfect. And then, of course, he does Baby Driver, which, again, great cast. One of the best soundtracks I've ever heard to a movie, and not just a good soundtrack, but the way Edgar Wright is able to use the music, like all the songs, and perfectly input them into the movie to fit every scene, which I think is also very impressive. Because it's one thing to have like a really good song in a scene of a movie, which that in of itself is great for me. Like when I heard Led Zeppelin's, can't even talk. Led Zeppelin's Immigrant Song in Thor Ragnarok, loved it. Because I love Led Zeppelin. I love it when music I love is in movies. So that's one thing to put like a good song into a scene, but to put like a song into a scene and have it fit perfectly and sync up perfectly to that scene is a whole other thing. So, me being the music person, I couldn't help but fall in love with this movie, and I don't know, like the chemistry between Lily James and Ansel Elgort, I thought was, again, like their relationship made sense. And why they would basically just want to like run off together and just drive somewhere with their music. Of course, the other supporting characters, John Hamm, Kevin Spacey, John Bernthal, everybody was great in this movie, and I don't know, it's just like one of those few movies where as soon as I left the theater, I just had this big grin on my face because of not just how much fun I had with this movie, but just how much I enjoyed it. Like, it had a nice blend of action, comedy, music, just everything about this movie. And, there have been tons of movies where I leave the theater and I enjoy it, but very rarely do I leave a movie and I just have a big grin on my face and I'm like, oh man, what a fantastic movie. Everyone needs to see this movie. Like, I even said that about, like, certain, Marvel or comic book movies, or even like certain Star Wars movies where I loved them. I really enjoyed them, but I wasn't necessarily like, I would recommend this to comic lovers or Star Wars fans, but I don't know if I'd recommend this to like a casual person. But like Baby Driver is just one of those movies where I'm like, everyone should see this because it's amazing, and everyone should love it. And if they don't, they can just leave. So yeah, I really can't say enough good things about Baby Driver because it was great. So yeah. That's my top 10 list. Hopefully I gave each movie enough time. Hopefully I didn't kind of drone on a little bit too much about one movie and not enough time on another. But yeah, there's my top 10. Hopefully you all have enjoyed this. And I'll try to upload a bit more frequently, because it was like 3 weeks ago that I last uploaded anything. But it kind of just depends on like, how I'm feeling, because honestly, I haven't really been that motivated just because I've been busy with other things. But yeah, so there you go, top 10 list. Hopefully you all have enjoyed, and I'll try to be a bit more active here on the channel, especially now that we're over 200 subscribers finally. So keep liking and sharing, supporting the channel here at Pasty Pale Productions, and yeah, until next time everyone, cheers.